Neuromuscular System, Alex Lees. On this slide, I'm just going to explain how the neuromuscular system responds to exercise. There are many different factors that happen when you exercise, but the main one is increased rate of nerve impulses. Golgi tendon organs send information to the central nervous system about the strength of the muscle contraction. This will be sent directly through the spinal cord and up to the brain. Heat will increase the speed of transmission as well as the Golgi tendon organs. The neuromuscular junction. The neuromuscular junction is a chemical synapse formed by the contact of a motor neuron and a muscle fiber. It is at the neuromuscular junction that the motor neuron is able to transmit a signal to the muscle fiber, causing the muscle to contract. When a neuron is stimulated enough, it will send an electrical impulse down its axon. However, it can only be sent at one strength and speed, but the frequency of that strength and speed can vary a lot. Can vary from a lot of impulses to not as many. The action potential are caused when different ions cross the neuron membrane. When a neuron is more negative, that the space around it is known as being polarized because there are lots of positive atoms on the outside. The wave of depolarization is known as the action potential. The action potential is the nerve impulse. How the action potential is propagated down a nerve, down the length of the neuron, down the length of the neuron. This is called a wave of depolarization because it is rapidly moving down the length of the neuron. Like I said before, the frequency of the electrical impulse will change depending on the stimulus. A weak stimulus will trigger less frequent action potentials, like picking up a piece of paper, whereas a bigger stimulus will trigger more frequent action potentials, like kicking a ball or crushing something. Action potentials also vary in speed as well. In the peripheral nervous system, or the PNS, there are myelin sheaths that are formed by a cell called the Schwann cell, which wrap themselves around the axon. These gaps that are formed on the axons, there are gaps that are formed on the axons, and these are called the nodes of Ranvier. These gaps allow the electrical impulse to jump from gap to gap, making the whole process a lot faster. This process of jumping over gaps is called saltatory conduction. In the central nervous system, myelination is caused by cells wrapping around the axon. Unlike the Schwann cells that wrap around the whole axon, these cells lack the regular nodes of Ranvier. The regular nodes of Ranvier that are in the PNS. A motor unit is a motor neuron and any fibers it controls. Size varies between motor units. Small muscles might have 2 or more motor units, whereas in the quadriceps there may be hundreds of them. The brain will recruit as many motor units as it needs based on the demands, not as many units for a smaller force, whereas to create more force the more units it will recruit. Different types of fibers will be used for different types of activities. Slow oxidative fibers have structural elements that maximize their ability to generate ATP through aerobic metabolism. These fibers contain many more mitochondria than glycolytic fibers. Fog fibers, or fast oxidative glycolytic fibers, are fast-twitch muscle fibers that have been converted via endurance training. These fibers are slightly larger in diameter and have more mitochondria, as well as a greater blood supply and more endurance than the fast-twitch fibers. A motor unit will only have one type of fiber, whether it be fast oxidative or slow oxidative. As you are doing the multi-stage fitness test, you would recruit different types of fibers for different lengths of activity and intensity. At the start, slow slow oxidative. As you slowly get towards the end, you'd use the fast oxidative glycolytic, and towards the end you'd use fast glycolytic because you are running at a high speed. Proprioceptors. There are two different types of proprioceptors. We use different types of equipment, sensory organs, such as eyes and ears. These proprioceptors in the eyes and ears give us information about every sort of movement. There are two different types of proprioceptors. One is called muscle spindles. The muscle spindles apparatus monitors the changes in length, shortening and lengthening, and how fast those changes occur. The reflex happens when the stimulus information goes to the spinal cord from the sensory organ, up the sensory nerve, and right back through the motor neuron. It will send an motor impulse to contract, hence the leg shooting up, and sends an impulse to your hamstring muscles to inhibit it, basically stopping the contraction, to allow the quadriceps to contract while the hamstrings just stays the same. Reciprocal inhibition sends sensory information to the brain to keep it updated. The other proprioceptor is called the Golgi tendon organ. They don't change in length, but they measure the change in tension. The inverse stretch reflex is there are receptors in the body that will receive information, and there will be neurons that will bring that information to the spinal cord and brain. This is called afferent. There is another similar thing called efferent, and instead of bringing the information in, it will take that information away from the CNS to create a response to occur. The inverse stretch reflex is in place to stop your muscles from overstretching to prevent injury occurring there. The sensory neuron that is in place to transfer information to the spinal cord will send an impulse down the sensory neuron to the spinal cord, where it will send another impulse right back to that muscle and tell it to contract as a reflex mechanism. This will be sent down a motor neuron. It will also inhibit the antagonist muscle to stop that from contracting as well. If you were to get a hammer on the knee in the doctor's room, they will hit the tendon just below your knee, and it will force your quadriceps to stretch, and your hamstrings will be inhibited because of that impulse sent down a motor neuron from the spinal cord. There are three different types of muscle fibers that are controlled by motor units. You have slow oxidative, fast oxidative glycolytic, and fast glycolytic. At the start of the multi-stage fitness test, there were only slow oxidative muscle fibers that will be recruited because you are going quite slowly, so there is no need to recruit fast oxidative glycolytic or fast glycolytic fibers. As the test will progress, you will need to recruit the fast oxidative glycolytic fibers, since there is a higher intensity, so you'll need to stop recruiting slow oxidative and start recruiting fast oxidative glycolytic. This is because the intensity of the multi-stage fitness test has risen. As you get towards the end of the multi-stage fitness test, however, you'll need to recruit the fast glycolytic fibers since you are sprinting. The Wingate test is different in the fact that you only use one type of fiber. This would be the fast glycolytic fiber. Fast glycolytic fibers are used in maximal contraction. Fast glycolytic fibers are primarily used in anaerobic glycolysis as their ATP source. They have a large diameter, and this possesses high amounts of glycogen, which is used in glycolysis to generate ATP quickly to produce high levels of tension. Because they do not primarily use aerobic metabolism, fast glycolytic fibers are used to produce rapid, forceful contractions to make quick, powerful movements. These fibers fatigue quickly, permitting them to only be used for short periods. Most muscles possess a mixture of each fiber type. The predominant fiber type that would be used is determined by the primary function of the muscle. In the Wingate test, you can see in both the graph and in the table how the test progresses. The peak power that was produced was 15.1 W per kg, and the normative values for the Wingate test is 10.89, which means the person in the graph has very good flask lipolytic fibers, since they do not fatigue very quickly. You can see in the graph there are little notches, which means that he could have worked harder, because he's slowly like maximal sort of minimal rest in that sort of pattern. But he could have worked harder. But the Wingate test is very demanding, so that is explainable why he would have done that. In addition, the graph increases very suddenly, which means he had put a lot of his energy at the start, which means he didn't have much at the end. To avoid this, maybe possibly doing it next time, he could have slowly increased it instead of really increasing it fast, because then he'll be able to go for a longer period of time at a higher intensity. In the sport application analysis of football, the neuromuscular system is used in many different aspects of football and many other sports, and is what makes contractions happen in our body. There are many different times in a match where the neuromuscular system will be required to recruit more or less motor units. The brain will decide what type of fibers are needed for this, for different types of intensities. For example, during a sprint high intensity, the brain will recruit large amounts of fast glycolytic or fast oxidative glycolytic fibers, whereas a jog will only need slow oxidative fibers. In addition to this, there are many other stages of play where a lot or not that many will be recruited. Also, the control of movement would also be in place, since this is what helps the body move and contract. As you're about to see them pass, an impulse will be sent to the brain where it will tell that body part to move in a specific way to receive that pass. This is what our body will do at the start of the tests that we did. So, example, the multi-stage fitness test or the Wingate test. This has been neuromuscular system.